Hey guys, hope you're all doing well. Today we're going to have an in-depth look at the Aserai troop trees. However, in this case we're only going to look at their main troop line and their noble troop line. The reason I'm leaving out the caravan guards and militia is that I think it's better to get a separate video for all militias and caravans so that you can see who has the best guarded cities and caravans. In return, I'm going to talk about the Aserai tactics, mostly the ones that work for me, at the end. Let me know in the comments down below what you think of this change, and please do consider subscribing and liking the video. But Alex, what about the in-depth sieging video? Well, Timmy, engineering skill doesn't work like it should, in fact it hardly works. However, the Imperial faction trait does work. At least it did in 1.3 beta, and I feel like it's something the devs will fix soon and don't want the video to go out of date a day or two after release, so we gon' wait. Anyway, moving on to the pros and the cons of the Aserai military. Contrary to popular belief, the Aserai units aren't poorly armoured. In fact, their tier 3 units are better armoured than Vlandian's tier 3 units. However, they aren't Imperials when it comes to armour at tier 5 levels. They have a wide variety of infantry, including great archers with plenty of arrows, infantry equipped for melee, skirmish and anti-cavalry duty, and lastly shock troops with two-handed axes and thrown axes. However, they mostly use small shields. Just like Vlandia, they have no access to shields until tier 3, decreasing their tier 2 units' lifespan by some margin. Great cavalry options with Mamelukes and Pharisees giving Aserai access to both shock and ranged cavalry. Even though they have great archers, they're only available at tiers 4 and 5, otherwise you're left with skirmishers. With plenty of spears across the board, they are pretty capable fending off cavalry starting from the recruits all the way to their veteran infantry. Overall, the Aserai army has a pretty balanced unit roster with all sorts of flavors in it. With good tactics, it should be able to perform well against any army. Let's move on and have a look at their in-depth unit stats. Starting our list with the Aserai recruit. He's not too far from any other. However, instead of being armed with a short weapon, he's armed with a spear, improving his performance against looters and other low tier units without shields, and even horsemen. But at the end of the day, they're still a juicy meat shield. If you're not sure how the armor and skill ratings work, have a look at the first 3 minutes of the Battalion Unit Guide where it's explained nicely. Moving on to tribesmen, who will eventually represent the bulk of your infantry and archers. Just like recruits, they're only armed with the same spear and their armor rating doesn't improve by a wide margin. They're basically meat shields 2.0. Aserai skirmishers are a pretty versatile unit. Not only are they well skilled for a tier 3 unit, well armored, but they come armed with shields and short weapons for melee combat. They're javelins for skirmishing, and if they get targeted by cavalry they can whip out their spears, highlighting their versatility. Aserai Archer loses out on his versatility in favor of focusing on mastering archery, losing out on the shield and spear but gaining 40 arrows and a short bow, coming with an average skill rating for tier 4 and heavy armor in 2 of the 3 possible variations of this unit, making the third stand out with rather poor armor, which I find pretty odd. Master Archer is a great ranged unit in my opinion, and if you've seen my top 5 unmounted ranged units video, you'd know that I classed him second. Simply due to his potential damage, and having an asset like him in your army will definitely leave you with good memories as long as he doesn't engage a shielded formation. Overall, he's well armored and equipped as far as archers go, and a unit well worth investing in. Footman is the beginning point of your infantry. He has pretty average skill rating for his tier and his armor ain't anything special. However, he comes equipped with a shield and both a spear and a sword, excelling at melee and anti-cavalry duties, and from this point on he's only going to get better. Aserai infantry is a pretty good unit, maybe not heavily armored or skilled, however he can perform skirmishing duties alongside anti-cavalry duties. And when the melee breaks out in the center, he can whip out his sword, highlighting his versatility. Definitely your go-to infantry that can perform whatever you need to have done on the battlefield. Veteran infantry, just like his predecessor, can perform the whole array of duties. Skill-wise, we see upgrades across the board and a small hit to his throwing. Coming with heavy armor and such a variety of weapons, he's a force to be reckoned with. His only weakness is his rather poor small shield that once broken will prove to be a problem. Mameluke soldiers are the introduction to Aserai units on the other side of the coin. Just like tribesmen, they're badly armored and don't wield shields. They do come with swords or maces, and 1 in 3 also come with a spear. Mameluke regulars are just regular shock cavalry armed for melee combat if needed, otherwise their spears shall shatter their foes. Each one comes with a different spear, a sword or an axe. even though they're not the best armored, and leaving them in the thick of the combat renders them a bit useless, so attacking into your opponent's backline with them is a good choice. Mameluke cavalry take a step up from shock to ranged cavalry, swapping out their spears for bows and arrows, with slightly above average skill rating and okay armor for what they are. Even though they don't come with 2 stacks of arrows like most of other ranged cavalry, they do come armed with a shield that allows them to transform smoothly into melee cavalry mid-combat. Mameluke heavy cavalry is a great unit coming with a nice average skill rating and heavy armor, making it worth your time to invest in. Their noble bows and piercing arrows rain literal hell on enemies, and their mobility giving them great advantage. And I don't know how about you, but aesthetically they look great, just change the damn helmet. Mameluke Axemen don't really stand out for a tier 3 unit, just a slight improvement to their athletics, putting their skill rating above tier 3 average. Armor is pretty good for tier 3, but like all other shock troops they're only armed with an axe and no shield, making them vulnerable to range damage. Mameluke Guard are pretty solid, with a not too shabby skill rating and overall increase in armor rating across the board, except for their body armor which drops a bit for some reason. Now they also come equipped with a couple of throwing axes to inflict some extra damage before the melee. Mameluke Palace Guard are great, heavily armored shock troops additionally armed with throwing axes, and with one-handed swords for some reason, which brings down their average skill rating to 4, but they're still solid. If you like running around with shock troops, Mameluke Palace Guard is your go-to. Moving on to the noble troop line, we see the Aserai youth, poorly armored but with classy silk clothes, definitely will look fabulous when dead on the battlefield. Skill wise they're pretty average for their tier. I would recommend leveling them up against looters as they mightn't be able to handle anything more serious. Tribal Horseman is a good step up from the youth. Ditching the silky smooth clothing for something more battlefield friendly, they come with either of 2 spears, a sword or a mace, which will come handy fighting those simping Imperials. The first of the 3 Pharises is pretty good, with a nice skill set but pretty poor armor for a tier 4 unit. The highlight of his kit is the Jareed Javelins though, which can do some serious damage to heavily armored troops, never mind what they can do to lightly armored troops. Thinking that AI is better sniper with thrown weapons than both, they are deadly with both javelins and spears. Veteran Pharis skill rating doesn't increase by a whole lot, but they do make a huge leap in their armor, more than doubling their rating. Their weaponry doesn't really change, still comes with a piss poor wooden Adraga for some reason. With their high durability you can always charge them right into anything that doesn't have a spear to shatter enemy formations. Vanguard Pharis is truly a great unit, but I still wonder how a noble unit, a son of a noble, is still armed with a wooden Adraga. He gets a worse sword than the veteran Pharis, but in return he gets the Mameluke lance, which is way more useful at crashing right into enemy formations. Skill rating is very good after the recent changes to skills for all units, and with armor rating reaching 3, he truly is a force to be reckoned with. Now that about wraps up the Aserai units, let's move on to their tactics. I'm going to cover the variation of the tactics that work for me every time. The idea behind this tactic is to keep as many of your men alive into the next battle. Don't mind the map, it's not from the game but just serves as an illustrative example. Now keep in mind that the AI is not a master tactician and its behavior can be easily exploited to your advantage. Assume this is where your units spawn. I always keep a first line made up of 4th and 5th tier Aserai infantry units and position them in a shield wall to soak up the enemy ranged fire. Make sure to disable their fire at will so they always keep their shields in front of them, otherwise if enemies come into range they will drop their shields to the side to throw their javelins out, which will make them vulnerable to enemy ranged attacks. Their javelins will be useful later however. Second line, I keep my recruits, Mameluke soldiers, Aserai tribesmen and skirmishers, letting the frontline units shield them while they dish out some damage and wait until enemy infantry engages your frontline, then engage them too. My final line is made up of archers and master archers that damage any enemy smart enough to walk into their range. If it is possible, try to retreat onto a high terrain such as a hill to give them some extra range at oncoming enemies. Looking at our flanks, I keep my shock troops like Mameluke Axemen guards and palace guards on my left flank, and when I can keep up with the chaos of the battle I try to flank them around the main enemy formation if they haven't broken yet. If there's one thing that playing Captain Mode and multiplayer taught me, is that two-handed weapons shred through infantry attacked from behind. On my far left, I keep my shock cavalry made up of all units in the noble line and Mameluke regulars from the main troop line, and keep them to engage enemy cavalry or hit the enemy front line as it crashes with my front line. And lastly, my Mameluke cavalry and heavy cavalry on my right flank, providing extra ranged fire and mobility, or straight away sent out to harass enemy formations as they get closer. So each of these lines should be kept as a separate command group for you to maneuver about. Different battlefields and opponents will require for you to tweak this setup, however it should do you in 90% of open battles. If you guys would like me to cover different tactics and show their execution in game, only reason I couldn't do it here is because I ran out of space on my hard drive to record. Or if you'd like to see how to deal with certain tactics, such as mass ranged cavalry formations in the future videos, let me know in the comments down below. Thank you for watching, and best of luck on the fields of Calradia.